So that's one thing. And then I always say, just, doing your homework, be cautious of the lowest bid, or somebody that comes in and says, I can do it for this. Yeah, it's usually a red flag. What is the process? How are change orders handled? If there is something, especially in a reno, that you discover, say, that's a problem, how is that handled?
Welcome to Beyond the Keys podcast. I'm here today with Sheena Sinclair. She's from Bella Vista Developments, and we're talking about renovations. You started the company back in, with Jeremy, I think 2009, is that correct?
Yeah, it's 15 years this year.
That's a long time.
Yeah, time flies.
Can you give me a little bit more kind of background on your company and kind of what you guys are specializing in right now?
Yeah, so we actually started in renovations primarily. From there, it evolved into home building. And then we've just found a real overlap between the two. A lot of people that are coming to us don't know what they want to do.
Right.
Should we renovate? Should we build? We like where we are, but is it worth it?
Yeah.
So many questions. So a lot of times we're looking at both avenues. And then we look after everything start to finish. So we do design, construction drawings, permits, engineering,
So you're the perfect person to basically have on here to talk about renovations. I guess
Yes.
that's the moral of the story here. So it's like,
Yeah.
And I mean, with real estate nowadays, it's exactly what you were just talking about. People are constantly asking themselves,
Yeah.
like, what are my options? What's the cost? How,
Yeah.
I mean, within our market, that's moving really like quite in like a quick period. Properties are selling within a short period of time. You don't have the ability to have somebody in to give quotes on a renovation and so forth like they used to, right?
Yeah.
So now it's kind of, we're going to buy and we're just going to renovate and we'll hope for the best. So that's why sometimes I think people are maybe leaning to living in the house that they're already in and then making that renovation kind of work. But it doesn't always, that layout might not work for them or they need to grow into that property, right?
Yeah.
So what's your number one thing when you're looking at creating a smooth renovation? Like if you're looking at making it kind of as easy as possible, what are the main things that you think about when you're starting to, or somebody should think about?
Yeah, I think probably, one of the biggest things is establishing a budget. And everyone will say, well, that's really hard because I don't know what things cost.
Right.
But everyone still has what they're comfortable investing in their home for it to make sense, whether that's from an equity standpoint or just, their own personal comfort level. And then looking at the scope, does that match? Does the budget and the scope relate to each other? The other thing is looking at, what other frustrations can't be resolved with a renovation. And sometimes those tip the scale in the other direction.
Right. And so does someone usually start with pictures and come to you and say, this is what I want to make happen? Or where do people usually start? What would you suggest is the best way to start this renovation? Because a lot of times people are like, I want to renovate. And they're like, what do you want? And they're like, I don't know. And so then how do you find that person to be able to help you if you start?
So I guess most of our renovation consults would be done in person, in home.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of things that we're going to want to look at to make sure
so
that it's feasible.
So you go to the house, yeah.
And usually it starts with talking about the challenges that they have with their home. So not necessarily what they want, but it's usually, because that's usually what leads people to a renovation.
Right.
Is being frustrated, having no storage or not enough space for the kids. And all their backpacks and all their gear, the kitchen is too small or things like that. So a lot of times it's looking at that.
So it's not always finishes.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's functionality then, right?
Yes.
So interesting. Yeah, I would have thought from my point of view it was more the finishings, but I guess unless you're living, and then we always suggest to our clients live in your house first for a bit. to then
Yeah.
figure out what you really want to do to it.
Yeah.
Don't almost renovate it immediately, because you might be changing things that you don't really
Yeah.
know if it works or not, right?
Yeah.
So,
Which is why people who have been in their home for a longer period of time usually have a better idea of
Right.
what that looks
yeah,
like.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, are you seeing more people staying in their homes now? Like from your point of view in the last couple of years? Because I mean, property prices have skyrocketed, but
Yeah.
also renovation costs and building costs have went up, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
like they've went up, I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, probably about 35% on kind of the new construction
Yeah.
side. And then I think it was Jeremy or yourself was saying that cabinet costs have went up about 100% since pre-COVID.
Yeah, some of the price increases have been quite profound. So,
Right.
yeah.
And so then so you start with the budget, right? So
Yeah.
let's go into this. So if you're looking at getting this done, you start with the budget, and then people are immediately disappointed in what they're going to what they're going to get for what their money is. Well, I mean, we're being real here, though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean, to be totally honest, nobody's like, "Oh, that's a deal."
Yeah.
Like everyone's
No,
and it
for
usually
sure.
and it usually costs a lot more than what you really think it is, because everybody usually has more expensive tastes than what their budget is. Is that correct? Or
Yes, and I would say it doesn't matter if your budget is here or here.
Yeah.
The bigger your budget, the bigger your wish list. So
Right.
I always tell people, be prepared to compromise or have some flexibility, because yeah, it never goes as far as a person thinks it's going to.
Right. So let's put this in. So someone goes to hire you to do it. They figure out their budget. They're like, okay, here's my budget. Then you sit them down in the office. You go over everything, and then you say, this is what your budget is for these certain things, like the kitchen, the cabinets, the granite, and so forth.
Yeah.
And then you help them design that.
Yeah, yeah. So we break down, all of our budgets are broke down by line item. So all the materials and all the trades is very transparent as to what we're allocating. And then we would say usually for a reno, just because there is some variation there, that we would, recommend that you go into it with this range. So
Right.
you go into the design process with this range. We always carry a contingency, because
I was
we
just
know
going to ask. I was going to say,
things-
is it contingency fund where
Yeah.
you're like, I open up this wall and I didn't think
Yep.
that this ducting was going to run
And
there,
and
right?
rather than a client say have this fund somewhere, we like to just put it in and say, okay, here's where it is. We're going to be very intentional so that we're still trying to design within that overall budget.
Right.
And then if that works, if that budget works for the scope, then we can start the design process. Sometimes that means we have to, we don't want to do full demo, but we want to understand what's possible. So sometimes we'll go into a home and open up a wall,
Oh, okay.
just cut some holes in so they can still continue to live, but see what's going on there,
Right.
and see what's possible. So if we know, we can start planning. And then, we're going to do everything, all the interior design, all the product selections. We'll do 3D renderings so that people can really visualize what the
That's
space
a good
is going to
idea.
look like. Yeah.
I saw this one on Instagram, and I don't know if you've seen it, but they actually showed the renderings to where you can walk through it.
Oh, yes.
It's almost like
Yeah.
a blueprint of the way that it's going
Yeah.
to be, and I thought that was pretty creative. I mean, you have to have a big shop, and then you
Yes.
have to have
Yeah.
a big projector to be
Yeah.
able to do it and walk through it. But you can actually see the space as you're
Yeah.
walking through, and I was like, that's wild.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's crazy. You
Yeah.
do need a lot of space to achieve that, but
well, especially if you're wanting to build like a 4,000 square foot house, right? I guess you could segment it into
Yes.
like, okay,
Yeah,
now
they
you're walking
must.
through this, and here's your pantry, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, functionality is big, I think, in most of our stuff, and where I think that what are some of the things that you see people make mistakes on when they look at renovations, right? Like, I think that like you have a pretty great process on kind of, this is where we're going with things, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is how it breaks down. But like, what are, like, if someone just started, what you'd say would be like, this is what people's first mistake is in when they think about doing a renovation?
I think sometimes it's, sometimes we'll see people say, okay, I'm going to go and hire someone to do the drafting and do all the design work. So let's say it's something like an addition, or you're doing major structural changes.
Right.
Hire someone to do all that drafting, and then go out for quotes after.
Oh, so you put all this money into this design stuff, but you don't have any idea what it's going to cost and so forth.
And so if you can't actually proceed with that, I say that's just like lighting your money on fire.
Because what would the cost be on that? Like, are you looking at $5,000? Like, is that could be something
plus,
like that, depending on I guess if you had different designers and stuff involved and the rest of it,
and
right?
not to mention the emotional, just the disappointment. You've gone through this process. You're so excited about what you could have, and then it's not feasible anymore.
It's kind of like when people go to buy a house without getting pre-approved.
Right.
And all of a sudden they're looking in a bracket that's $200,000 more than what they can actually afford.
Yeah.
It gets pretty disappointing if you go from $700,000 to $500,000, right? And so
and you're never going to be happy, but you could have been if you were more realistic.
Right.
From the start.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then I always say just, doing your homework, be cautious of the lowest bid. Or somebody that comes in and says, I can do it for this.
Like way cheaper than somebody
else. Yeah,
it's
usually a red flag.
Right.
What is the process? How are change orders handled? If there is something, especially in a reno, that you discover, say, that's a problem, how is that handled? Is there an opportunity to find those savings somewhere else, or is it just a straight, cash call for additional funds?
Yeah. Nobody likes cash calls, but I mean, when you're looking to renovate, sometimes those things do come up. But at least that you've talked about them and they're not something that should have been built into the budget in the first place.
Yes,
right?
and just knowing how those things are going to be handled. Another mistake I see is just not investing in quality materials where you need to, like what's going to take wear and tear. So like, cabinetry is something that's really important for us. Your kitchen takes a lot of wear and tear, hinges, drawer glides, those type of things. So you want to, you want to make sure that is going to stand the test of time.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So getting into design things, so we're going into 2025, right?
Yes.
This will be coming out in January 2025. And so what are some of the major new design things that are coming into New Year that you're excited about, or something that, I mean, everybody's got their flavor, right?
Yes,
Everybody likes
true.
their side a little bit different, right? You're designing one property that's got some really cool rounded corners and some, and what kind of wood is being used in that?
I think that is an oak.
Oh, okay.
We're seeing a lot more woods with like rich graining and just that warmth to it.
Okay.
Sort of really coming back in versus a lot of the more, just I guess that increase in texture.
Right.
And so whether that's wood grains or texture with like wall treatment or wallpaper or tile, even we're seeing more texture in tile, just more layering of sort of those finishes into spaces. Really nice.
It's amazing how designs just keep on coming back, because I mean,
right.
like not that the wallpaper that now we're renovating is coming back, but some of it is. Like some of it, like the ones that you go back into the 70s and it's that velvet wallpaper that you go and you pet it, and it's just like, well, sorry, I don't pet walls, but I kind of you do.
But you would if it was velvet.
But you do, right? And it's interesting. And I mean, I have to admit, I put some wallpaper up in my room, kind of as a feature wall as well too, and I love it. And the designs are like, I mean, you get anything nowadays, right? So
and I think we'll see a lot more color.
Okay. Like brighter colors, or
just richer, like saturations of color, and not necessarily like feature wall, but almost like whole rooms.
Okay.
Or
so not as much gray and white.
Not as much gray and white, yeah. The browns have started to come back, and those warm tones have started to come back. But yeah, we're going to see, I think, more color.
With cabinets, do you think you'll espresso cabinets will come back? 'Cause
I don't know.
Those were like big when I first got into real estate, and everybody thought they were super cool. I sprayed mine out 2 years ago, so we got an awesome painter that can spray those for cheap if you need his number. But it's interesting because you go into these houses and you're like, these are amazing cabinets, but like I don't want to throw them out because it's going to cost a fortune, but maybe if we, and I don't think painting them, but if you put a Varathane coat on it, it's almost like new again, right? So
Yeah.
what color do you think would be, this, not a skill testing question, but just your opinion? Like, I mean, you're seeing some blues, some like, I mean, some other colors come. What do you think is going to be the color for cabinets this year?
Oh gosh. I don't know if there will be a color. I think green's going to continue to be popular, but we're seeing a lot of like all wood kitchens again.
Really?
Yeah.
See, like I like an oak kitchen. The only thing was that golden oak that we all grew up in. Kind of, it just like, I don't know if it gives it PTSD or what it does from just like maybe when I was being bad. I remember seeing these cabinets. So, but yeah. That being said, I mean, wood. It does make sense, right? I mean, they're more durable. They last longer and so forth.
Touch-ups
right?
are easier if something were to happen.
Right.
And then also. For stain matching, you know, if something ever did happen, something got really damaged and needed to be reordered, you can always do a stain match to a natural, like to a wood.
Yeah, that
product,
makes sense.
So
yeah, floors are way easier to do that too, right? As if it's a hardwood, and they can do it. A lot of times it's just taking your crayons out and getting them the right tone, right? So, I guess, how can people find you guys? And if somebody's looking to do a renovation, what would you say the first thing somebody needs to be able to do? Like if it was just the number one thing.
Oh, the number one thing? Give us a call.
Give you a call. That's a good one. Yeah, for sure. So do you think that they need to figure out their budget first, like before you phone somebody? Or do you think pictures? Like, would you say like, hey, this is kind of what my taste is and this is our budget? Is that helpful?
Yes, I think so. If you, if you have access to the plans for the house or can get them.
Never thought of that, but that makes sense.
That's a great place to start.
Right?
Yeah, which in the city can be obtained from building standards at the City of Saskatoon.
Great point.
So get your hands on those. Have a budget in mind, a scope, even if it evolves a little bit, but you know, that starting point of what the scope looks like. And yes, if you do kind of have a style or have some ideas, a Pinterest board, then that's always a good place to start to reference.
Okay, well that's awesome. Well, Sheena, thanks for joining us today on on our podcast, and we look forward to promoting your stuff. And I've been working with them for Bella Vista Developments, and we have some houses for sale. So give us a call if you want to see those properties, and then give Sheena and Jeremy a call if you need renovations or any custom homes done. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.